the focus of my presentation is on the possibility to find effective educational tool to prevent and counter hate speech that has been rising during the pandemic. We have to think that the term hate speech was born during the end of the 1980s among a group of lawyers who were representative of the critical racial theory. In particular, there is a seminal article of Mari Matsuda who spoke about racist speech, and she, in the 1989, used for the first time the term hate speech as synonymous with racist speech. So she referred in particular to a group of a discriminated minority. And in a note, she said that this term could be used also to the speech against some categories, some groups, such as women or homosexual. But from that time, the term hate speech has enlarged, also referring to individuals. Now we will see in the course of the presentation how. We have to notice that since the recommendation of the Council of Europe in 1997, the problem of hate speech has become increasingly urgent, mainly because of the emergence and massive dissemination of the internet, which has expanded the possibility of hate messages. Hate, in fact, is quickly transmitted online through any channel, from emails to sites, from chat to blogs. It is the architecture of the internet itself that make the messages in general viral. The media work as a sort of sounding box, bouncing the hate speech comment or message from one channel to another, so to make them viral. In recent years, the migration crisis has led to an increase in hate speech in Europe. According to the European community, hate speech has now become one of the most common forms of intolerance and xenophobia in Europe. Intolerance, which, however, affects various social groups for the most varied of reason. Not being limited to discriminated groups, as Mari Matsuda stated in the far 80s, but also extending to individuals because they are perceived as belonging to some categories like homosexual or, I don't know, Jewish community and so on. But also because they are labeled according to certain physical or character particularities. Now it is difficult to give a definition that can be comprehensive of hate speech, especially as regards the legal framework. In fact, Alexander Brown, in very interesting articles written in 2017, agrees and shows how it's very difficult to comprehend comprehend in one definition the phenomenon of hate speech. Also because it has several nuances, and we have to consider also the context in which it is spread. And also given the vastness of forms that hate speech can take and the variety of means by which it is disseminated. For this reason, the ultimate reference to be used to define the phenomenon is the one contained in the General Policy Recommendation number 15 of the European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance of the Council of Europe. And let's see together what this recommendation says about hate speech. Hate speech is understood as the advocacy, promotion, or incitement in any form of the denigration, hatred, or vilification of a person or group of persons, as well as any harassment, insult, negative stereotyping, stigmatization, or threat in respect of such a person or group of persons, and the justification of all the preceding types of expression on the ground of race, color, descent, national or ethnic origin, age, disability, language, religion or belief, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, and other personal characteristics or status. So, as you see, the definition is very wide. What happened during the pandemic period? And it happens that hate speech has increased, both among adult and young people. Research, I'm quoting here among that Amnesty International and the Light, that we will see something about the Light report after, and Human Rights Watch has found that hate speech has become radicalized during the pandemic period, confirming some established target categories. For example, you have to think that the Jewish community in general increases in the statistics, the hate against the Jewish community increases in the statistics at any time of crisis, and so happened also during this time of crisis. And included also new group, for example, regard to the xenophobia. Human Rights Watch noted that Human Rights Watch did his research in all around the world. And it's very interesting, it's research because it examined every country in the world, how the hate speech raised in every country during this period. And it detected that the Chinese and Asians in general were, in the early stages of the pandemic, the most widespread hate target worldwide, because they were considered the cause of the spread of COVID-19. And Human Rights Watch reports also hate crimes committed against Chinese, in particular in the United States, but in Italy we have had also some episodes about it. And also the migrants were considered likely to be responsible of a clandestine infected invasion. But there have been also new phenomena, a new target group against the hate speech spread during the pandemic. For example, in Italy, even it was allowed to people to run for sports in the streets during the first lockdown. Many haters did messages of hate against these runners because they were labeled as plug spreaders, and so other categories. Um, such a climate is traced from some pedagogical reflections to a current progressive affirmation of a sort of negative pedagogy, the product of an economic, political, and social context in which hatred is normalized, such as people like Waltman and also Trama and Brambilla claims. Since this hatred normalized is acted out in every place. Think, for example, on TV and, of course, on the social media. Young people are particularly exposed to the consequences and risks of hate speech, both because they lack experience and cultural and cognitive tools, and because they are always connected to the web through different devices. You have to think that before the pandemic, before 2020, children and teens, children who had access to technological devices were estimated around the 19%. Now is almost the 100% that have the possibility to have access to the devices. The smartphone, the children that have a smartphone for their own are always are in the age are in the age lower than before. And in fact, distant learning implemented during the pandemic period has significantly lowered the age of children who have access to electronic devices, and it led to an increase in toxic content in their chats. In particular, in Italy, research, in particular, I'm quoting here De Somma of Osservatorio in Difesa, noted that cases of cyberbullying against children aged under 10 have doubled. Light, it's written, I don't know what is the pronouns of this name because it is L1JHT, but I pronounce Light, is a transnational agency that is specialized in measuring online toxicity. And this agency analyzed in the early months of the pandemic millions of websites, popular teen chats, and gaming platforms. And it noted that there has been the 900% increase in hate speech on Twitter directed towards China and the China Sea. 200% increase in traffic to hate sites and specific posts against Asians. And these are the data that we are interested in. The 70% increase in hate between kids and teens during online chats, and the 14% increase in toxicity on popular gaming platforms such as Discord, for example. Now, the repeated exposure to hate speech not accompanied by an awareness and a critical reflection, risks, on the one hand, consolidating stereotypes and prejudices against individuals or groups of people, and on the other, degenerating into a trivialization on such content. In particular, there has been a research done by Stefano Pasta in 2018, Stefano Pasta noted, he did his research on a popular platform of teens that is Ask, and he noted that many messages of hate were posted by adolescents without a really knowledge, really awareness of what of the consequences of these messages. When they were asked about why they sent a message of hate, very often the teens answered, okay, but it was a joke. It wasn't a serious speech. And so Pasta demonstrated that there is a very teeny boundary for children, for teens, between the joke and awareness about the damage a hate message can do to people. So, what are the strategies that we can use to counter hate speech? It is necessary to devise educational strategies that cultivate critical thinking and social commitment to counter hate speech, trying to combat the contemporary speed and fragmentation of information, which risk undermining reflectivity and overall moral judgment, reducing empathetic abilities. As Milena Santorini claims, online communication are based on speed and depersonalization. The lack of physical contact leads to a loss of the foundation of empathy that is built on feeling the other, risking the loss of that face-to-face dialogue which human beings need. Now, there are some pedagogical approaches to counter hate speech. Some of that are based on an education to a so-called click activism. For example, in Europe, between 2013 and 2017, there has been an European project called No Hate Speech Movement that trained young people aged between 18 and 35 to use a counter narrative on the internet and on the chat. They were trained to detect where a hate message was and try to answer to this message with a counter hate narrative. These projects were aimed also to carry out through media campaigns, inviting users to counter hate speech with posts, comments, but also with media events. So this is a sort of speech versus speech that highlights the values of tolerance, pluralism, individualism, and respect for others. However, Cohen Almagor, for example, claims that it is not enough, it is not sufficient entrusting the fight against hatred only towards because although counter speech actions are important, they are likely to remain goals in themselves. These kind of initiatives need to be accompanied by educational interventions in favor of a cultivation of critical thinking aimed at developing the citizens' sense of responsibility. For example, there is a literature about this issue that consider the net as a city. We should think of the internet as a town in which a community lives, and so the relationship within this community are the same that are carried out within a town. A city. So we need educational interventions in favor of a net citizenship. And this kind of intervention must be aimed at cultivating critical thinking in attempt to undermine the contemporary attitude relating to the speed and fragmentation of information. And much reference literature recommends educational intervention based on critical reflection and the construction of stereotypes starting from the younger age groups. In particular, Michael Wortman suggests that we should teach children from the youngest age what hate is, because he is convinced that we cannot delete completely hate from our lives, because hate was, is, and will be, such as okay. And so we cannot avoid to face hate in our lives. So it is important that we help children to understand what is hate and who are the haters. And this kind of education can function as a kind of vaccine, thanks to which students of all ages develop the skills to criticize the speech of a multiplicity of sowers of hatred. However, education based purely on critical reflection may not be sufficient when it comes to fully understanding the suffering and damage caused to people by the language of hatred. It should be accompanied by an education in caring thinking, which enhances the ability to think compassionately and look at the world from other perspectives, building the ability to make value judgments. And a particular kind of educational intervention of this type is that of the philosophical inquiry, according to the model of the community of research of philosophy for children. Philosophy for children is a curriculum realized by Matthew Lipman and Anne-Margaret Sharp, and this is aimed at develop that Lipman called the complex thinking. P4C is a way of going beyond education to critical thinking, because Lipman defined complex thinking as a multidimensional thinking. in which there are three dimensions of the thought that are critical, creative, and caring, that we don't have to image as a three-dimension independent one by the other, but we have to think to that as overlapped. They stay always in dialogue from each other. Because Lippmann said that it is impossible to build a good mind without cultivating this three dimension. The critical thinking needs a creative thinking to be developed, and so such as a caring thinking. The philosophy for children, so just a moment, P4C, Philosophy for Children, adopts Dewey's inquiry, which is deeply rooted in experience. And the Dewey inquiry starts from an indeterminate and problematic situation that springs the doubt. For example, in the everyday life, there is something that breaks our routine. And is in that moment that arises the doubt. And this moment, we need a resystematization of the knowing experience. And this is resystematization goes through a research that consisting of trial and error, aimed at the attainment of some solution, not to be considered definitive, but to be eventually reassessed in a fallibilist perspective. What Dewey had in mind was the scientific method. And Lippmann translate this path of inquiry in the curriculum of philosophy for children, using the philosophical investigation through a dialogue that is planted within the class that become a community of research. Children become philosophers themselves, and dialogue investigating philosophically the world surrounds them. The indeterminate situation from which starts the inquiry is introduced by materials built by Lippmann and Schartz that are formed by short philosophical stories and manuals. And they are constructed in a spiral model that follows different levels of cognitive ability and complexity from the kindergarten to high school. The inquiry device is the community of research, within which the participants question the meaning of reality and give sense to the world that surrounds them. In a process of deconstruction and co-construction of meanings, where the teacher gives up his or her role to become a reflective guide, who is called the facilitator, who guides but does not direct the heuristic flow. The pedagogical matrix of P4C is based on the recognition of the educational value of the experience of philosophical inquiry, aimed at the development of complex thought. The pedagogical prerequisite is that the practice of philosophical research allows participants to develop the skills to reason, to form concepts, and to investigate the meaning of problems. At the same time, it is able to prepare thought to investigate the sense of their residue and assumptions taken for granted, and to dialogue with others, learning to place oneself in the other person's point of view, and to cooperate in the common research of the meaning of experience. P4C is a program widely used all over the world, and UNESCO has supported the program since the end of the 1990s. And for this reason, it is very evident that the methodology helps children to develop the ability to, one, first of all, think reflectively. That means developing awareness in a good construction of reasoning. Think creatively. That means developing the ability to image other possible worlds and to be able to understand the perspectives of others. Think caringly. That means developing the ability to care for oneself and others, make value and moral judgments, and foster empathy. The development of complex thinking is a useful device to prevent and counter hate speech. In fact, it acts on the deconstruction and prevention of the formation of stereotypes and prejudices, which are at the basis of hate speech. But furthermore, it helps the formation of the sense of community through the construction of habits like listening and understanding carefully the other's perspective, feeling the other, and building moral judgment. So we can conclude that the P4C community of research can be a good device to give children and teens the tools to be aware of the consequences with which hate speech could lead to. Okay, thank you very much. I hope that I'm not late, and thank you for your attention.